What should it say?
That there is a part of us that never ages. I mean, how old do you feel right now? Set aside aches and pains and anything that has to do with the physical body growing older. When you were, say, 12 years old, didn't you look at people who are your age now and think that they must somehow feel different? But now that you're your age now, don't you feel the same way you did as when you were a kid? Hopefully a little bit wiser. Well, I realize now that that's how my 87-year-old mother feels. That little girl inside her is still there, and it's the physical body that changes. Now, this is, of course, obvious. We know that. But think about that part of you that never changes. That is the part of you that never dies. That's the part of you you're going to take with you when you pass to the other side. That is what I tune into as an evidential medium when I sit with clients in this room and connect them with their loved ones. This evidence that I get from them, those who have passed, shows me that the vibration you create for yourself here, through your thoughts, through your actions, through how loving you are, is what you carry with you when you cross to the other side. And I tell people that this may give you pause, but if you're grumpy here now, you're going to be grumpy when you get to the other side. How do I know this? Because I've sat with people and felt exactly what they feel like, and I explained to their loved ones sitting here with me, well, this person feels a little bit crabby or a little bit like a curmudgeon, a grumpy old man. And they say, well, that's exactly what he was like in this lifetime. One of my favorite stories came when I gave a reading for a young man who had lost his mother. In actuality, it was his father who really wanted to hear from his wife of 61 years, but he was a little bit too embarrassed to sit with a medium, so he sent his son. So I'm sitting here with the son, knowing we want to hear from Mom, who was married to his dad for 61 years. Really excited to hear from her, and I tuned in, and sure enough, felt a presence over here that in my system represents a mother. And I'm expecting to feel this loving energy. But instead I reported, well, your mother's here, but I see her sitting in a rocking chair, and she's watching the people walk by on the street, and she feels very critical. And you know what that man said to me? You've got my mom. Wow. So does that make you think, hopefully, you realize that the way you are now, you'll be pretty proud of the way you'll be when you cross to the other side. But if you have room for improvement, that's part of what this course is all about, raising your vibration so that you are always radiating the highest possible essence of who you really are. That oneness that connects all of us, that consciousness with a capital C. I tell people that you don't become angelic just because you pass to the spirit world. You grow your angel wings here. That's a big responsibility. And we're given limitless opportunities to practice.
I hear you say it's hard to find a good pair of jeans.
This energy, this loving energy, is what a medium taps into. It's what you are. We just can't sense most of that spirit energy that's around us, again, because we have this frequency analyzer. But I want to give you some ways of looking at energy, at vibration, so that you recognize that there truly is a greater reality, and that you are part of that, joined to it by the very essence, the oneness of you, that consciousness. The point that I want to make is that this vibration of consciousness, it's all relative to the higher and lower vibrations. I'm going to use a very simple analogy here of everything being vibration. What do I have here on this plate? I have rapidly melting ice cubes. They're solid. And when I hold them, I feel the cold on my fingers. That signal goes up through my skin to my brain. My brain says, oh, it's solid, it's freezing cold. My eyes see this thing, and it does a search in its computer bank here, and it says, ah, I recognize that. That's ice. You see how the brain just did those calculations based on that input. But what happens if we then look at what I have in this glass here? The brain looks at that and says, that's no longer solid. That's a liquid. I can touch that. I needed that. I could taste that. And my brain simply takes the frequencies of those inputs, those signals coming into this frequency analyzer and says, that's water. But what is the difference between this and that ice over there? Simply a difference in frequency, isn't it? Otherwise, it's the same makeup. If you were to speed up these molecules even faster, it would become steam. Speed it up even faster, and we would no longer see that steam. It would be called superheated steam, and it could burn your hand, but you couldn't see it. Does that mean that it isn't there? This is the point that I'm getting to. That just because we can't see something, because our frequency analyzer is limited by the frequencies that it can interpret, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just like your loved ones who have passed to the other side. Just like the very essence of you as a spirit being. Just because you can't see your spirit doesn't mean you aren't a spirit. Here's a perfect example. You would, of course, recognize this as a fan. And you can see these blades right here. They're visible to the eye because of the frequency. But if I turn this fan on, where do the blades go? You can certainly hear the fan now, feel the effects of it, but you can't see the blades anymore. Why? Because they're vibrating so rapidly. But I guarantee you, if I stuck my finger in there right now, and I'm not going to do it, those blades would let me know they're there. And now we can see them again because I've slowed down the frequency. Those in spirit, your spirit, are not visible to us because they're vibrating so high. But does that mean they don't exist? There is another reality out there. It's all around you, but this frequency analyzer limits you from seeing it. I want you to see the beauty in this world beyond the physical world. And at least imagine that there is a greater reality and you are part of it now. I said that everything is relative, everything depends upon how you perceive things through your brain. Do you think different creatures perceive differently? Well, in the last lesson I introduced you to one of my little dachshunds, Gretchen. And I got to thinking about how Gretchen perceives the world. And I thought, I've heard of how dogs see colors differently. So I wrote to a friend who's a veterinarian, and she contacted a veterinarian ophthalmologist for me to give me a picture of how dogs see colors. So this picture is a little bit pixelated, but you can see it's kind of muted. This is how poor Gretchen sees the world, and I say poor because I want to compare it with how you and I see the world. Look at the difference. So much more vibrant, so much more beautiful. Yet if I were to say to Gretchen, there are colors in this world so much more vibrant than you can imagine. If Gretchen could speak, she would say, oh, Suzanne, you're crazy. How could there be colors different than I can imagine? And you know, those in the spirit world in my readings have said to me, Suzanne, there are colors in the world more vibrant than you can imagine. In our world, the colors would astound you. And at first blush, I want to say, well, that's crazy. But can you imagine? I like to imagine. I've gone beyond imagining to knowing there is a greater reality, and that you are part of that, and I am part of that. And it's all consciousness. That is the essence that links everything that is. That is what you are made of, is pure consciousness. It is that which never changes. It is that aspect of you which is eternal, which never ages, which never dies. What frequency are you vibrating right now? That's what you will take with you to the other side. Could you be vibrating higher? That's something that you're going to get out of this course, how to vibrate higher. For now, we're going to end this lesson with an exercise that will give you the opportunity for a full day to see the world with new eyes, to look around you and see your connection with all that is by seeing yourself as everything you do and knowing that everything you do is also in you. I'll see you back here after you've had a chance of experiencing that.
I was living and working in Hong Kong, and one day I found a lump on this side of my neck. And when I went to the doctor and they did a biopsy, they discovered that it was lymphoma, which is a form of lymphatic cancer. I was very, very shocked and surprised. So over a period of 4 years, I developed so much fear of this cancer, and I was following everything. I was researching about it, and I lived my life. I started to live my life just trying to get rid of this cancer that was in my body. But I kept getting worse and weaker and weaker. And at that point, the doctors said that it's too late even for anything. Your body is already too far gone. You're already dying. You only have about 3 months to live. I kept wishing that this was a bad dream. My body was not absorbing any nutrition. I weighed 85 pounds. I looked like a skeleton. My lungs were filled with fluid. The tumors now in my body were all over my lymphatic system. They were the size of golf balls. And by February the 1st, 2006, I went into a coma. The nurse gave me a big dose of morphine because I hadn't been able to sleep or anything for many days because of the fluid in my lungs. And I was in so much pain and so much discomfort. And then on February the 2nd, in the morning, I didn't wake up. So it was at that point that the doctors told my family that these were my final hours and that my organs were now shutting down and I was going through the dying process. But what everybody around me didn't know was that I had left my body and I felt amazing. I could see and feel and hear everything that was happening all around me. But I felt light and free, and all the pain was gone and all the fear was gone. Something that I call unconditional love. I'd never felt anything like that in my physical life before.
Introducing our latest addition to the leisure sports collection, the Ice Silk Pants. Made with premium quality.
And I was aware of my body lying there in that hospital bed. But my body looked so small and helpless and lifeless compared to how I was feeling now. And I wanted my family to know that I'm fine. In fact, I'm better than fine. I feel fantastic. But there was no way for me to communicate with them. I was able to see and hear everything the doctors were doing, like they were taking fluid out of my lungs, and it was very different from having physical eyes. It was more like I had 360-degree peripheral vision. I could be aware of things that were happening behind, on the sides, above, below, everywhere, and beyond the walls. I was seeing and hearing conversations take place beyond the hospital room. And my husband was talking to the doctor outside, about 40 feet away, outside the room that I was in, and I was able to see and hear everything. I could even see and be aware that my brother, who was living in a different country, he was living in India at the time, I was able to see that he was rushing to get on a plane to come and reach me because he wanted to get to me before I died. I remember even feeling, gosh, I better not die until he gets here.
like many of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, like I did, I knew science is the pathway to truth. And as much as I wanted to believe a lot of what I'd heard in my Methodist church growing up about an afterlife, about God, power of prayer, my work in science, and especially as I pursued a career in neurosurgery, left me wondering how conscious awareness could survive the death of the brain and body. So I taught for about 15 years at Harvard Medical School. That was all setting the stage for my near-death experience. So it's important to point out we never, ever understood why this happened. When I first got to the emergency room, the doctors were very alarmed because of how quickly I'd gone downhill. Over 3.5 hours, I was deep in coma, grand mal seizures, and they found out the next day from microbiology that it was gram-negative bacterial meningitis caused by E. coli. And then, of course, they put me on 3 powerful intravenous antibiotics on a ventilator, and I went through that week not really showing any signs of improvement. So by the end of the week, the doctors held a family meeting on day 7 of coma. It was a Sunday morning when they said it was I was gone from a 10% chance of survival down to 2% chance. But unfortunately, they thought if I was in that 2% survivor category, that would never translate into any meaningful recovery. So that's why they suggested stopping the antibiotics and just letting nature take its course, let the infection run, let me go. So way too deep in coma to have had any experience, especially when you realize that the CT and MRI show extensive damage, and yet the exact opposite is what I experienced. So how that journey unfolded was beginning in that earthworm-eye view, I was rescued by a slowly spinning white light. Initially, that portal led up into what I call the Gateway Valley. It was far more real than this world. It makes this world look like a dream. That's one thing that people have trouble understanding because they think this is hardcore reality. Well, that world is far more real than this one. It was so refreshing and reassuring I cannot put it into words. And it was soon after that that I had this sensation of a soft summer breeze blowing through that was like my first awareness of the divine presence of that infinitely loving force that so many other near-death experiences from all continents, all cultures, all belief systems, all millennia in the last 5,000 years have talked about this same kind of realm. And that's where our religions come from and all that.
To me, it felt very, very real. In fact, it felt more real than this physical reality. It was as if my awareness was expanding more and more, like going through different levels, because after a while, I started to leave this physical level. And when we leave our physical body, we leave behind everything that's associated with our body, our biology, our voice, our race, our religion. All of that gets left behind. And what crosses over is just pure essence, pure spirit, or pure love. We can call it whatever we want.
Over the last 2 years.
And so I started to encounter the essence or the spirit of other people who were familiar to me, like my dad, who had died 10 years ago. I felt his presence around me. And even though he wasn't in his physical body, I recognized him immediately. It was literally like his energy and my energy just merged. And I was like, oh, Dad, it's you. I just knew. And we're not even talking to each other. We don't need to explain who we are. We know what each other is feeling right away without words. My dad and I, when I was growing up, we had a very turbulent relationship because I rebelled against my culture. I come from a culture where women are considered second-class citizens. And so my dad and I clashed a lot, and I even ran away from an arranged marriage. So when he passed away, I had always thought that I had let him down, that I had disappointed him as a daughter. But now, here he was on the other side with me, and all I felt from him was pure, unconditional love. And I felt he understood why I was the way I was. So it was just the most incredible feeling. I then felt that I was surrounded by other beings, and I didn't recognize them all from this life. But I did feel that I was just unconditionally loved by them, and that they were there to protect me and help me. And I started to understand that I've always been protected, but not just me, we all are. But we don't realize it, we don't know this.
I was surprised by the incredible power of love that I felt by thousands of beings around me going off into the mist with their heads down, murmuring, many praying. I remember the angelic choirs above that were fueling all this beautiful dancing and merriment served as yet another portal to higher and higher levels, all the way out to what I call the core. Infinite inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with unconditional love of that divine source. And I would cycle through those levels. I would tumble back down to that earthworm eye view, but I could navigate back up by remembering the sounds. The music provided portals to traverse those realms. And I'd been told every time I entered the core, you are not here to stay. You'll be going back. But we'll teach you many things.
And then a lot happened on that side, but I reached a point where I felt that I had a choice as to whether to come back into my body or to stay on the other side. No part of me wanted to come back because my body was sick and dying. I was suffering here. My family were suffering, taking care of me. But it was like I entered this state of clarity where I then understood why I had been sick. I understood how it was that so many of the thoughts and the decisions and the choices I had made in my life had led me to that point where I was lying there on that hospital bed. And I realized that I had lived this life of fear instead of a life of passion and joy and love. I had never allowed my soul, my spirit, to express itself and be all that it had come here to be, and that I was more powerful than I had ever known or believed. So in this state of clarity, I received the message that now that you know the truth of who you really are, go back. If you choose to go back into your body will heal. And it was at this point that I felt my dad was telling me, you need to go back. It's not your time yet. And so it was at that point that I made the choice to come back. I started to understand that I had a bigger purpose to fulfill, something much bigger. And I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. But it was like I had the understanding that all I have to do is be myself and live my life fearlessly, and my purpose would unfold before me.
Make the leap. Bring what you do online with GoDaddy. Whatever your thing is, we've got the right.
And it was at that point that I started to come out of the coma. My family and everybody around me were really shocked, but they were so happy that my eyes were opening up. It was like I had one foot on each side. I kept saying to them, Dad is here. Dad's telling me that it's not my time. I'm going to be fine. And I was just saying this over and over, and they were wondering what's going on. The doctor basically told my family, don't raise your hopes because she's still critical. Sometimes it happens. And then the doctor said, these are the drugs just messing with her mind. She's hallucinating. But then I said to the doctor, aren't you the doctor that took the fluid out of my lungs at about 4 a.m. this morning? And that's when he said, but you were in a coma, you couldn't know that. So he got really shocked and started to wonder what's going on. I said to my husband, isn't he the doctor that said, I'm not even going to make it through the night? And my husband said, you couldn't possibly have heard that. He said that to me outside of the room, down the hallway near the nurses' station. And then what started to happen is over the next few days, the tumors just continued to shrink, and the doctors just could not understand it. I had to start getting a little bit stronger and start getting out of bed. And within 3.5 weeks, they could find no trace of the cancer anymore. And within 5 weeks, they let me go home to live my life cancer-free. And that was 14.5 days ago.
And then I came back to this world. But when I did, when I woke up in that ICU bed on day 7 of coma, all I knew was where I had been. My brain was so wrecked, and I still had no memories of my life before. So when I was first coming out of coma and they first extubated me, I was still not even recognizing loved ones at the bedside, although that recognition in my language came back very rapidly, literally over hours. Memories were even more complete than they had been before coma. That was something that was a real shock. Everything turned around tremendously. I mean, inexplicably. And that's one of the points that's made in that case report about my medical records, is how this is not just like, oh, we see this at 1% of the time, or we just don't see it.
So the medical people's opinions was very, very mixed. One thing that they all agreed on is that I'm lucky to be alive. They all agreed that I should have died. Another one of my doctors says that all the things that I experienced, what I say happened on the other side, seeing my dad and everything, he says that was my brain hallucinating, and he says that was the drugs messing with my mind. But that's the other part that the doctors and the medical people could not explain, is how was I able to see my brother? How did I know he was on a plane flying to see me? And how did I hear the doctors? But my doctor, who was treating me, actually said that you're not the first person to tell me such a story. And he said he has heard other patients who have experienced crossing over on the other side. And what happened, though, is that I was interviewed once by a local newspaper, and then the newspaper journalist said to me, would your doctor be willing to verify everything that happened? And I said, yes, he completely believed me. But when the newspaper interviewed him, he didn't say everything the way he said it to me. And he was too embarrassed to speak it publicly. And many years later is when another doctor said to me that, yeah, if we say these things publicly, we can be ridiculed and we can even lose our license.
True open-minded skepticism is absolutely important ingredient in this quest. I will say I was my own worst skeptic. I'd spent 54 years of my life owning a very conventional scientific worldview. But essentially, my coma journey through a neurosurgeon interested in explaining consciousness had a tremendous number of lessons to help me understand that much of what we thought was completely wrong. And what I've found in the 11 years since, I've worked with many scientists around the world who are interested in consciousness. All of the tremendous evidence that is available to all of us who study things like the afterlife, parapsychology, the reality of things like telepathy, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences. All these phenomena of consciousness, bringing science and spirituality together and explaining consciousness in a much more satisfactory fashion than the very bleak and paltry fiction of materialist explanation. So obviously you have to study these phenomena directly.
And that leads to the notion of a nihilistic universe. It's a universe that doesn't have any meaning or purpose. That, in a sense, is the way that modern civilization works. That the best that you can do in a nihilistic universe is to die with the most toys. That's the way it's sometimes put. And among other things, the notion that your life really doesn't have any meaning to it, and that you're completely isolated from other people, which is another consequence of materialism, leads to things like greed. All of the human vices are then amplified because you have to look out for yourself. You're not connected with other people. It doesn't matter if somebody's starving on the other side of the world. That's the view of reality that we end up with. We're becoming better and better at creating distractions, which is an escape. And there's nothing wrong with an escape. I mean, sometimes the world is such that you want to escape it. It's not clear, though, that it's telling us something which is what we really want to know, which is what is actually going on here.
It's alarming, it's tragic, and it should fire up anybody who heeds what I say to take this work serious, dead serious. Its raising of consciousness truly is salvation. It saves us from this pit of darkness or ignorance which is called the world. Infinite love, infinite fulfillment is what you might call our real home. This is where we come from. Somehow we left it, we lost paradise, and we've fallen into this world. The human condition, lost in thought, is really a state of darkness or ignorance.
True.
No Wi-Fi! Welcome to Japan! But be careful! There are few free Wi-Fi spots!
Only yours comes to you.
That is such an important concept, and I realized when I came back from my coma journey that the vast majority of problems in our world are not because I don't love my neighbor enough, not because I don't love my enemy enough, but I don't love myself enough.
The wonderful story about this new science is that programming is what creates our life, and parents are programmers. And so if parents knew that their words that they say to a child are shaping the future of that child, then parents would start to say different things to their children. Instead of criticizing them, saying that's not good enough, and you don't deserve this, and who do you think you are, trying to get them to do better. But remember, a child under 7 is not thinking. It's just reporting. What does it hear? Not good enough, not worthy, not lovable, not deserving. It's more effective for parents to say, you are the most wonderful child, you are smart, you can do anything, you're very powerful, you're a creator. Why? Because if those are the programs, and then the child's life is 95% from those programs, all of those programs give power to a child. And so we have to recognize, I want to be a conscious parent, so that if both parents are doing this, at some point, they will rewrite the negative programming and then become truly conscious parents and creating the next generation with power.
This is a lesson that's very crucial for this world to learn today, especially in the face of ongoing violence, warfare, conflict, refugees. Humanity at our current level of progression is in a very kind of barbaric phase of our growth. And it is time for us to wake up and realize we have responsibility. In fact, I would say that our materialist science, by giving us this lead of thinking we're all separate, and then Darwinian evolution, which was misinterpreted in the 20th century as survival of the fittest in competition, only the strongest survive. That's not the way evolution really works. In fact, modern biologists will point to the amount of collaboration and cooperation in the biological world. That's how biological success happens. And we see exactly the opposite with what humans are doing in wrecking our planet, even as we speak. And this kind of greedy selfishness and the polarization of wealth with the rich. I just saw today that the 400 wealthiest families in the United States have more wealth than the bottom 60% of the population. That's wrong, completely wrong. And we see that all around the world.
Becoming rich comes with a number of perks. The appeal of getting more money means that your life becomes a lot more comfortable. And yet, I know plenty of very wealthy people who are very, very unhappy because they learn, among other things, that while you can get some creature comforts and your life can be easier in many ways, it does not address the question of who and what we are. And it also is not going to address the question of you're going to die, and what do you think about that?
My wife, my family, my home, my job, my work, my possessions, my money. What can we take with us beyond the grave? It's really a good question. What can I take with me beyond the grave? The things we leave behind, Jack would tell you, if you reach my age, it's only too obvious. Clouds come and go, seasons come and go, everything in this world comes to pass. That's the nature of this world. It is stillness. It's eternal, it doesn't change, does it? It's here, it's in France, it's in Australia, same stillness, unchanging, always now. It's absolutely crucial to be present. If you ask someone, when were you happy? Almost everybody will give you an answer. Years and years ago, often when they were children, and suddenly, without knowing why, they were just happy. And if you ask them to describe it, they'll usually give you an answer which describes being present. Just seeing the sunshine, just by the seaside, seeing the waves, or just stroking a dog, just suddenly feeling the touch of the dog's, look at the dog's eyes. These are moments of insight. And amazingly, people remember them all their lives. Because those are the real moments we've actually touched on what's real in life.
It doesn't mean that all the problems suddenly go away. Life is always offering stresses and struggles. But no matter what, in the end, everything's going to be okay. And if it's not okay right now, that means it's not the end yet. Even death is not final. Even death is something that's not to be feared.
But at the end of the day, it's the actions we take in this world that are part of our growth or lack of growth in those spiritual realms. Because if all people knew is, oh, that's a beautiful afterlife, this is such a crummy little existence for me, I'm just going over there. Wrong move, because you never dodged the issues that you face in this life through suicide or through leaving this world. And so it's very important to realize there is no way out but through. And the more we bring that love into this world, the more we actually grow as souls. And that's why this whole universe exists, is for sentient beings to make these discoveries, to learn and teach together, in growing towards their understanding of their connection with the universe.
Interesting, as a scientist, I never believed in spirituality because I was programmed with the belief of genes controlling life. But as my world changed and I started to see how the environment was controlling the cells, I started to recognize something, that no two people are exactly the same. And the identity is a set of protein receptors, antennas, just like television antennas, on the surface of the cell. I say, well, why is it important? Because these are called self receptors, receivers of self. Then where's the signal of self coming from that activates these antennas? The answer is not inside the cell, outside the cell. And that's when I thought, oh my goodness, my identity is picked up by these antennas, but the antennas are receiving a broadcast from the environment. This is the television, and I am the broadcast. Because if I am the broadcast is always here. It's the televisions that come and go. So then we have to recognize the idea of death is not what we have believed it to be again. Death just means, okay, the television's broken, but you're still the broadcast, you're still here in a different form. And you can manifest the physical part again, that's called reincarnation. But you're always here as a spirit. And once we own that we are spiritual entities, then we become empowered because the fear of death will disappear. Feel invisible moving forces that influence the physical world. I go, okay, cool. I go, wait, there's another word with the same definition. Spirit. Invisible moving forces that influence the physical world. Whether you say the word field or whether you say the word spirit, they are functionally the same thing. And so this is a uniting of ancient spirituality and modern science are coming across to become one again the same.
I love that quote from Nikola Tesla. When science first begins to investigate non-physical phenomena, they will discover more in the first decade than they have in all the existence of the scientific revolution. And I think that we're getting very close to entering that decade even now. This world is on the verge of a tremendous revolution in thinking that is long overdue.
I think that we desperately need a kind of sense of spiritual reconnection in the Western world. There's been an extreme process of secularization, of abandonment of traditional religion in favor of a secular scientific worldview. But that turns out to be very thin and unsustaining and gives such a narrow view of human nature and consciousness, and also leads to consequences that are so destructive to the environment and our relationship to the environment. Previously, before Descartes, in the Middle Ages in Europe, the worldview was that nature is alive, the earth is alive.
Ay, patay. Oh gosh.